What if your own government intentionally withheld the cure for a deadly disease, not because of a mistake, but just to watch and see what would happen? That's not a plot from a movie. It was a real medical study in the United States. For an unbelievable 40 years, doctors watched, took notes, and actively lied to their patients, all in the name of science. Science is supposed to be a journey toward progress. But what happens when that journey tramples over basic human decency? When the quest for data ignores every moral line in the sand? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on some of the most notorious medical atrocities ever committed. These are the shocking, true stories of experiments that sacrifice people for papers. It's going to be disturbing. Our first story doesn't start in a war zone, but in rural Alabama, 1932. The U.S. Public Health Service started a study to track the natural, ugly progression of untreated syphilis. They enrolled 600 poor African-American sharecroppers. 399 of them had the disease. Here's the betrayal. The men were never told they had syphilis. Doctors told them they were being treated for bad blood, a vague catch-all term for just about any sickness. For joining the study, they were promised free medical exams, free meals, and even burial insurance. But the treatment was a total sham. They were given placebos like aspirin and mineral supplements, designed only to keep up the lie. The study was supposed to last 6 months. It went on for 4 decades. But the truly sinister part? When penicillin became the standard life-saving cure for syphilis in the 1940s, the researchers deliberately kept it from the men. They went out of their way to prevent them from getting treatment, even giving local doctors lists of their names with instructions to cure them. By the time a whistleblower finally leaked the story to the press in 1972, at least 128 men had died from syphilis or related complications, 40 of their wives had been infected, and 19 children had been born with the disease. From there, we have to go to one of the darkest chapters in human history, the Holocaust. Inside the Auschwitz concentration camp, one name became a synonym for medical terror: Josef Mengele. Nicknamed the Angel of Death, he was an SS physician obsessed with twins and human genetics. He treated the camp like his own private laboratory, performing gruesome experiments on thousands of prisoners, often children, without any anesthesia. Twins were his special focus. He saw them as the perfect way to explore heredity. He would inject one twin with a deadly pathogen like typhus, and then transfuse their blood into the other to see what happened. If one twin died, Mengele would often murder the other immediately to perform comparative autopsies on their organs. He attempted monstrous procedures like sex changes, and he removed limbs and organs without reason. He was fixated on eye color, injecting chemicals into children's eyes, just to see if he could change them. Survivors describe his chilling personality, how he would offer candy to the children, who sometimes called him uncle, just moments before they were taken to be experimented on and killed. Of the roughly 1,500 sets of twins he tortured, only a few hundred survived. These stories are hard to hear, but they're absolutely essential to remember. They represent the ultimate betrayal of trust between a doctor and a patient. If you believe these histories have to be told, please take a moment to subscribe and help us continue this work. Of all these experiments, which one stands out to you as the most horrifying? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Our final story also takes place in a concentration camp, this time Dachau, where Nazi doctors performed sadistic tests for the German military. To study hypothermia, they forced prisoners into tanks of ice water for hours at a time, or left them naked outside in the freezing cold. These freezing experiments were done to figure out the best way to treat German pilots who'd been shot down over the frigid North Sea. Doctors coldly recorded their prisoners' final moments, measuring their heart rate, their body temperature, and their spasms as they slowly froze to death. They tested different ways of rewarming the victims, from scalding hot water to even more horrific methods. The suffering was unimaginable, and the experiments were almost always fatal. Of the roughly 200 people forced into these trials, around 80 died directly, and many of the survivors were executed afterward. These men saw their prisoners as nothing more than biological material, to be used up and thrown away for a military advantage. The Tuskegee Study, Mengele's experiments, and the Nazi freezing trials are horrifying reminders of what happens when science is completely detached from morality. These atrocities, and so many others like them, eventually led to the creation of strict ethical standards, like the Nuremberg Code. That code's first and most important principle is the absolute requirement of informed consent in any human research. The victims of these experiments were almost always from vulnerable and marginalized groups, people whose voices had been stolen and whose lives were considered expendable. Remembering what happened to them isn't just about staring into a dark past, it's a vital warning for our future. It forces us to confront a critical question: how do we make sure that our search for knowledge never, ever again comes at the cost of our humanity?